Okay, the nice lady told me that recording is in progress.
Woo! We are ready to go. All right. Good morning,
Awesome.
everyone.
So you guys have a great workshop. I will see you all later. Kim, I'll catch up with you later this afternoon or tomorrow and just
Okay.
kind of debrief a little bit. Thank you,
Sounds
everyone. Sorry, I got to
good.
take off. I've got multiple doctor visits to bring people to today.
Okay.
That's just how it goes.
Lots of fun. Yep. All right. So I appreciate Tim's introduction. I do go by Kimberly, just so that you know. But yes, I am a pastor in Saline, Michigan. I've been ordained for about 25 years and have been doing emotional intelligence work for the past, oh, good grief, say 16 or 17 of those years. So started fairly early on in my career, and they were looking for um, pastors who had lots of aptitude and potential. To take the training, and my Presbytery leader recommended me, and it has turned out to be the most influential work that I have done in the course of my ordained ministry. So my commitment for a long time has been to try to bring this to more pastors, to more lay leaders. CREs is another wonderful outpouring of this. And so I'm hopeful that you will be able to gain some insight as well, and some understanding of how this can be a wonderful gift for you in your ministry as it's taking place. So I thought we'd begin with a word of prayer, and then I would love to get a little bit of information about each of you as well, so that I know the situations that you're in and where you're coming from and what might be most helpful for you to learn today. So let's start with prayer. Holy One, we are grateful to rest in your presence and to know that you bring us every day something new that we can learn and grow in. We ask that your Spirit be among us and present and working today as we seek to become stronger leaders in the ministries that we have, in the congregations and organizations that we serve, and in who we are as your people living in this world today, sharing your love and spreading your hope. In your holy name we pray. Amen. All right, so I told you a little bit about me, and I have mainly served as a solo pastor, though I was an associate pastor early on, specializing in a couple of areas. But I've been basically leading churches. I've done one interim ministry position. The rest have been installed and called. My current is designated with a congregation that has been through conflict. And I wanted to serve with them because I wanted to see what it would be like to come back from real church splitting conflict and see how this church could grow and live again. I work with the Interim Ministry Network now. I spent a lot of my years with the Center for Emotional Intelligence and Human Relations, which did close. But the Interim Ministry Network has taken a lot of that on. And so if you're looking for more training, that is a possibility as well. So let's hear from you. Who would like to go first? Just tell me where you are and what your situation is like and what you're hoping to learn today.
I can go.
Thank you, Jen.
My name's Jen Uhas. I'm a certified Christian educator and serving at Christ Presbyterian Church in Toledo, Ohio. And I am the director of faith formation and just hoping to understand emotional intelligence more, and how it can help me in working with different leaders and volunteers, and so a little bit for personal growth, but also to use in my work as well.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. Welcome.
Well, I'm Wayne DeMarco. I can't see who else is out there, so I guess I'll just go.
Okay.
I am currently serving as a commission ruling elder for the Wycliffe Presbyterian Church in Wycliffe, Ohio. which is outside of Cleveland. And this is my third CRE assignment. In my working career, I was a certified quality engineer for a steel company. And I also teach, certified quality engineering from time to time at a local community college. Now, since I am officially old, I can take Project 60 classes at Cleveland State at no cost. And the classes I have been concentrating on lately are leadership and adult learning and so on. And emotional intelligence happened to be one of them. And unfortunately, the text that they had emotional intelligence in 3 different models, looking at it 3 different ways. And there was no focus. You could either do this, you could do that, or you could do that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that this particular session gives me more focus so that it's a tool that can be useful in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate that introduction and that context. That's helpful. All right. Barry or Tabitha?
Sure. So I'm Barry Chant. I'm the General Pastor and Stated Clerk of Eastminster Presbytery, which covers 5 counties in Northeast Ohio from Akron to Youngstown. And I'm on the steering team for the Synod's CRE ministry. And so partly I popped in today because on that steering team, I want to understand a little bit better what I'm helping steer. And also, I thought this would be a good one for me to come and learn about too. So.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Glad to have you here today, Barry.
My name is Tabitha Williams. I am a CRE serving a 2 parish in Loudonville and Perrysville, Ohio. This is my first call. I've been with them for about 4.5 years. And I wanted to take this training just to help me better myself in leadership positions and to be able to advocate and share what I've learned with others so that we can become a unified and better working team.
Okay. Awesome. All right, you all have some wonderful goals and learning aspirations for today, and I am grateful that you've chosen to take the time to spend with me today. Thank you. This is indeed one of my joys in life, and hopefully it will be a blessing to you as well. I'll look forward to hearing your feedback afterwards in whatever way you can give it. All right, so let me go ahead and get started with some of the material. All right. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to not do this yet in slideshow mode because I want to be able to type into a couple of these slides coming up. So today, indeed, we are looking at emotional intelligence and leadership styles. My previous workshop that I did for the Synod centered mainly on emotional intelligence. So if after today you think, I really want to understand emotional intelligence a little bit more, go back to that one, which was, I think, March, maybe April. It was somewhere in that time frame, but I'm thinking it was March. And watch that. That will help as well. I'm going to do a good bit of it today, reviewing and application of it, but it will give you more. All right, so today our goal is to look at core emotional intelligence skills, to understand how emotional intelligence and leadership styles interweave. Today, I'm going to be presenting to you 6 leadership styles from Goleman and Boyatzis' book, Primal Leadership, which one of the versions looks like this. They have several, they've done it in hardcover, softcover, and there's an updated softcover. In general, I like how they have gotten to their stuff. They take vast research that they do with a lot of companies, and their work is primarily with companies, public companies in leadership or private companies in leadership. And after the research, then they distill and figure out what it says. And so after talking with thousands of people and working with them, this is the 6 leadership styles that they've come up with. Now, Daniel Goleman is broadly considered to be the main pioneer of emotional intelligence. He didn't start it, but he's the one who picked it up and ran with the concept and really did a lot more work on it. So you're going to see his name. Richard Boyatzis in Cleveland is one that continues work on that as well and does a whole lot of training. And so they've been a good team through the years in creating what is the Emotional and Social Competency Inventory, otherwise known as the ESKI. It's one of the ways that you can take a survey to help learn about your emotional intelligence skills. And that's one of the things that I do on the side is I'll offer it with a whole training workshop, but I also administer the ESKI to people and coach them on their results. So that's the main material that we're going to be using today. I do want to talk a little bit before the end about emotionally healthy organizations. We don't have nearly enough time today to get into it deeply, but today we're going to focus on leadership style and emotional intelligence, and that's going to lead you into seeing how you can help your church, your place where you're serving, become more emotionally healthy. And then a few final tips and takeaways. All right, so I'd like to begin with thinking a little bit about leadership and leaders. And I'm going to ask you to think about an admired leader in your life and also a leader that you've seen as sadly doing more harm than good. Sometimes the way people frame this is a best boss and a worst boss activity, but I think you see a variety of leaders. And so I didn't want it to be just bosses. I wanted you to be able to think about people that you know well enough to know their characteristics, their skills, their traits, and to identify those that you think are ones you'd like to be more like, and those that you see are trying to do good work, but sometimes are not helpful in how they're going about it. So I want to give you a moment to just think about that and get those folks cemented in your head. And then we're going to do a large group activity that's going to allow us to kind of identify some of those characteristics so that we can put them down. Okay. Does everybody have the 2 leaders that you want to think about? And it could be more, but at least 2, one admired and one less admired in your heads.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's start with, and you're welcome to just call out because Wayne, I know you can't see the rest of us. So whatever is helpful, I'd like to know what are the top characteristics you see in your admired leader that makes them someone that you would aspire to be like or that you respect? What are those characteristics?
Compassion.
Okay.
The ability to motivate and make others better.
Okay.
I don't know how to phrase that.
It's a little bit of a coaching mentoring, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to see multiple sides of an issue.
Okay.
Intentional.
Intentional leadership is so important. Good. Mm-hmm. I'm going to add empathy because for me, that's one of the key things that I think good leaders offer is the ability to put themselves in someone's shoes and understand what it might be like for them and to give them care.
Good
Other
communication skills.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else about your admired leader?
I can remember what Admiral Halsey said when he recommended someone. He said, when you're given command, command.
Mm.
Good leaders command.
All right. We'll go on to the next one, but if you think of anything else you want to add, just let me know and I will pop back, okay? Now I want to talk about and I said harmful leader for lack of a better term, but we acknowledge that there are leaders who definitely do some good, but may tend to do some harm as well. And that might be what people remember most. What kinds of characteristics do you see in these folks that you want to highlight?
Arrogance.
Okay.
People pleasing.
All right. What else makes them more likely to be harmful leaders than helpful leaders?
Disconnection from those they lead.
Mm. Yeah, if you don't know what's going on and how people are feeling and responding, that can be very hard.
I think one of the things that I thought about for the good leader was like being inclusive. And I just wasn't sure how to say it, but like, you know, people are drawn to that person or being part of what they're trying to accomplish. I just didn't know what label to put on that. But I'm bringing
It sounds
it
like
up.
it sounds like you're talking about some vision too, Jen. Is that fair that they have a vision that you want to be part of?
I think so, yeah. And not like tunnel vision, but yeah, they're something that you want to be part of, or like you want to give energy to see it through or something. But I think I'm thinking even more about it because I think for the harmful leader, I think about someone who is you know, kind of trying to do everything themselves, or they're not inclusive, or not bringing people on board, not getting, you know, like the group hype or whatever you want to call it. They just don't have that gift. I mean, not everyone has that gift or can do that. Or they don't know how to communicate it, which is why I mentioned communication.
Yes.
Not sure where the flaw is, I guess, but yeah, I think that's super harmful when you do have someone in a leadership role that doesn't have that gift of being inclusive or getting people to embrace that vision or something.
All right, so I've put about 3 down here, Jen, that I think I'm hearing from you. So someone who is not inclusive might do everything themselves, either alienate people or not welcome their skills. Someone who lacks vision and the ability to bring people together, and someone who has poor communication skills. Is that all fair from what you said?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Any other things we want to highlight for the characteristics of a leader that can do a little more harm than good?
Well, you just reminded me of one, bootlicking.
Okay. which might go along with the people pleasing that we said earlier. So yeah, that's good. Okay.
So people don't like to have a boss doing this, doing the same job again that you just finished.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I even had a CEO one time who corrected spelling errors.
Mm.
You would think a CEO would have better things to do with his time than the correct grammar.
You would think.
That's interesting because like I've seen like what I would call like a nitpicking leader, and I've never really like been, labeled it like that. But yeah, it's like all the things you could be doing, and this is what you're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. All right,
Okay.
let's put that in here too. We're getting some great adjectives here. I love this. Okay.
I
All
think,
right, so this, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I think, just like, again, I'm not sure how to label it, but like just a presence, like being present, showing up, or like a preparedness. I
Mhm.
think about like leaders, leading a meeting or something, giving the people coming the material that they need to make it a productive meeting. So I guess a lot of things could go into that. Not that you need to be super organized, but I guess there's a little organization to that. But it shows people like I value you, I value your time, and what you could bring to the table.
Okay, so I'm putting that, I guess, in the admired leader characteristics.
Yeah.
The flip side is maybe what I was about to say for the
Uh-huh.
the harmful leaders is I've worked with several who had very poor follow through,
Mm,
who always talked about they were going to do something and then didn't, or didn't even seem to be making the effort towards that thing, and then that just became a trust issue. Like,
mhm.
Yeah.
And trust issues, I think, that is a trust issue, and trust issues can be even more. So I'm going to list that separately, Barry, because I think that is what is engendered by a lot of this. And when you lose trust, I would argue you lose most everything that allows you to actually move an organization forward and lead um, responsibly and enably. So, yeah. Okay. All right, good. I think we've got a good start here. So you're going to think of more as we go along. But what I want to do now is take a little time to ask how much of this is about emotional intelligence? Okay, that's something we need to identify. So we're going to take some time to look at the core skills of emotional intelligence and compare those to the skills of the admired leaders and to the lack, the what's missing, what's not good about the harmful leaders, so that you can see kind of how this matches up and if it matches up. Now, emotional self-awareness is the core piece to start with in emotional intelligence. This basically says that you become aware of yourself, of what's going on inside of you, your thoughts, yes, your feelings, definitely, and how all of that affects your presence in life, whether it is in your personal side of life, whether it is in your work life, any areas. How do your emotions and what's going on inside of you affect your performance? So, self confidence comes into this, right? We need to be aware of our abilities, our gifts and skills and talents that God has given us that we can use in our work and in our life. We need to be able to be accurate in how we see ourselves. Now, I'm going to tell you, in all my years of working with pastors, what I have found is that pastors tend to see themselves as less capable, less able, less gifted than those around them see them. And it's interesting because a lot of times in the business world, it can go the other way. They talk in primal leadership about how CEOs are often so insulated from criticism and from helpful feedback, that they see themselves as much more talented and gifted than than others see them. Pastors tend to go the other direction. So having an accurate self-assessment, no matter which direction you are, is really critical to being able to assess your leadership skills and how to improve. And then being open to feedback is an increasingly important part of self-awareness. To understand that others see us differently as well as the same. And we need to be ready to hear what they have to say so that we are able to step outside of ourselves and see ourselves in a new light. So if you had to say whether or not any of this is related to our our admired leader or our harmful leader, what would you say? Are any of these skills related to what we named?
Well, it takes self-confidence to delegate and mold the followers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you don't have self-confidence as a leader, how can you possibly make those you lead better? You're
True.
more worried about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're not aware, for example, of anger that you might have inside of you,
The
or
arrogance.
frustration, you're going to play it out into the organization in a way that's not helpful. Mm-hmm. So this is the core skill. Once we have this, we build on this to create the rest. But this is the core starting place for emotional intelligence. All right, let's look at what's next. Then we go to emotional self-management, the idea that we can take our impulses, our emotions, all of the different things that are running through us, and keep them in check to the place where we can decide what to use and how to use it. This goes back to somebody said intentional, that admired leaders are intentional. So I'm going to say right up front that I think you're only intentional if you're able to emotionally self-manage. So part of what's under here is your adaptability. How do you handle change? How do you handle whatever is thrown at you in the middle of a moment? And I think we've all, as leaders, had those moments where we thought, whoa, this came out of left field. What do I do now? Your adaptability is part of emotional intelligence. Your achievement orientation, your persistence and willingness to keep going and be dedicated to meet your goals and what you believe is expected of you in your role. And then positive outlook is all about persistence. To keep going and despite all the stuff that comes your way and that could dissuade you or set you back. So do you see any of these things in what we listed for us, the admired leaders, or lack of them in what we might have listed for our harmful leaders?
Well, obviously, if a leader doesn't manage themselves and starts taking everything out on the people that work for them, the people that work for them will stop working for them.
Yeah.
You know, there's an old saying, there are a lot of leaders in the military that you'd charge a machine gun nest for, and there's a bunch of other ones you wouldn't cross the street to buy a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And what usually makes them different is this self-management thing. They are in enough control of all situations that they continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I once had a situation when I was a trainee back when we rode horses to work. We had a guy that came in. We had a couple of bad things happened over the night, and they lost a furnace somewhere. And this guy was head of maintenance. He got called at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was not happy. And he opens it and slams the door and starts yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. He says, I should fire you, and you. Fires me, I'm a trainee. Fires 2 truck drivers that don't even work for him. Leaves the room, comes back, slams the door again, and he says, and I should think about firing me for having idiots like you work for me. Now, do you want to work for a guy like that, or do you want him out fixing the problem that has come up and make sure that everybody else that's working has something to do? I mean, that guy had no self-management at all, and he
No, so
thought,
that tells me we missed a few things on the harmful leader section, didn't we, Wayne?
no, but what it was, he had no self-management. He figured that if he made his point clear, everybody else should just stand to and follow. And unfortunately, that's the way management was in the steel business so many years ago, because a lot of those guys came out of the military. And but he had no self-management at all. He didn't care who he exploded against. And then after maybe a couple of days later, he might apologize. But you
But
don't
you
want to
wouldn't
work.
know if or when it would happen again, and so
Yeah,
that was hard.
exactly. You know, you don't want to work for people like that. You try to avoid them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we can see some relationship of this to how people are as leaders, for sure. The third section in emotional intelligence then is social awareness. We've focused on the personal. How well do you know yourself? How well do you manage yourself? Now it's getting out into relationships with other people. And so social awareness has 2 major categories. It is empathy, being able to sense others' feelings and perspectives and to care about it, to have compassion, to take an interest. Not necessarily overly to where you're interfering in their out of work life in ways that are bad, but to be aware that what they're going through impacts their work life and who they are. And then organizational awareness, to be able to read your organization and sense what the emotional situation is, how people are feeling, how power relationships work, how the really it's the currency. What currency is in your organization? How do you read it, understand it, and become part of it? Those are both really, really helpful for working with other people, and they help build trust. So did you see any of these things in what we listed as admired leader characteristics or harmful?
We said connection with the people that work for you. This matters. I mean, I get all these leadership lessons from places there shouldn't be. And one of them was a crazy movie where Whoopi Goldberg ends up coaching the New York Knicks. And she's trying to coach the Knicks, and she's talking to the team captain, and the captain says, you have to realize that these guys are more than basketball players. They all have lives, and there's things going on sometimes, and you have to cut them some slack once in a while when you find out about this stuff. And, I hadn't thought about that because, like I said, the leadership style that I started out with was, you do what you're told and stand to and move forward. They didn't care what the heck was going on at home or what was going on in the organization either. I've been in several cases where we were acquired by somebody and the entire culture changed. And leaders have to adapt to that. You can't say, well, I don't want to do this, because I like it the old way. Well, guess what? The old way is gone. So, both of those things matter.
Yeah. And as CREs, you are seeking to set the tone and help improve the culture in your church, whether you are operating from the Christian education standpoint or leading the whole church. That is what you have the opportunity to do, is to help assess where the culture is in your congregation, to be aware of the traditions and tendencies, the ways that your church handles good things and not so good things, and to make intentional change to set a healthier way if it's needed. These two are going to be key. These two traits are going to be key to being able to build the trust to do it and to make it happen intentionally.
Well, that leads to what we call church dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
For example, CREs usually end up in small churches, and small
Yes.
churches run quite differently socially than large ones do.
They do.
And if you
You're right.
try to run a small church like a large church, it isn't going to work well.
No,
And
and I would argue you need these traits more than ever because small
Yes.
churches work based on relationships.
Absolutely. Matriarch and patriarch.
Yeah. So let's look at the fourth quadrant because that gets more into how we manage relationships. So this fourth sphere of emotional intelligence, and again, each of these kind of builds on the one before it. This is where it all kind of comes together. In relationship management, good leaders have positive influence. They're able to coach and mentor others. They have vision, and they use that vision to be inspiring leaders that make people want to get on board and go where they're going. They help individuals and groups become their best selves. They're able to manage conflict healthily and see the dimensions of it and the impact of it. And they're able to work well as part of a team. They don't consider themselves above everyone else. They are with people together, working as a team. So what parts of this did you see in what we named earlier? So there's the coaching and mentoring right there, right? We named that for sure. Ability to see multiple sides of an issue, I think, is there as well. That visioning piece that you have an inclusive and welcoming vision. Jen, what are you going to say?
Just that one. That's the one I was looking at, the visioning and just having that energy that invites people to be part of a positive shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's a real element too that you raised of care about employees, staff, volunteers, all of that I think is part of that section too. And of course, here, harmful lead or disconnection from the people they lead, that you can't get anywhere close to relationship management if you're doing that. Trust issues. Wayne?
The another good leadership source that goes through all of this is when it tells the story is the miniseries, The Band of Brothers. And
I've not seen that.
What they do is, this is an actual group. This was historically accurate, and there were several leaders there that were awful, and there were several leaders there that they would have followed to the ends of the earth, and you got to see both of them interact with each other. I mean, Captain Solville, he was the epitome of the bad leader. All of his non-coms resigned. Now, when you in the military, if a non-com resigns, he can be shot for desertion. So
Yikes.
all sergeants resigned. So, that tells you the kind of leader he was. But now, Colonel Winters, on the other hand, he had leadership characteristics that we've all talked about. He cared about his men. For example, he once disciplined one of his lieutenants for gambling with the soldiers. He said, "I don't want to see you ever take $1 from these men." And so he cared for his men, and they cared for him as he went up the ladder. And it was just amazing how many good leaders he developed along the way. So you could see the contrast and could see that he knew the situation. I mean, in wartime, the situation changes every day.
Mm-hmm.
And in his case, they had just come back to England for a leave, and all of a sudden they're on a boat over to Belgium to Bastogne with no winter clothing, and had to hold the town in the middle of a 5 degree below zero weather. Now, a leader could have cried, moaned, and groaned, I can't do that, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have that, but he somehow motivated his men to do it, you see. And that's what we're talking about here. The management of the relationship. Know how to push the buttons and know when to push the buttons, I guess is what I would say.
Okay. And I think one of the things you referred to right there that's really important is morale.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's guided by a lot of these things we've discussed, is how to keep morale of employees, but also volunteers. In churches, we work with mostly volunteers,
Yes, we do.
especially in small churches, and keeping them feeling that they are vital and important and cared about, that we have compassion for them, and that their work means something.
Absolutely.
They're part of the team together is a really key part of this. So I want to stop for a moment and just ask if you have any thoughts or reflections on what we've done so far, looking at what good leadership is about, what it might not be about, and how emotional intelligence is part of this. Has anything surprised you? Has anything come together for you at this point so far?
Well, the point you made about volunteers, that's critical. I took a class on nonprofits, and that is, remember, volunteers aren't paid for what they do. They have no financial reason to stay with you. So that makes the leadership even more of a challenge and more of a reason why you have to be on the front lines with them. You can't manage them from afar. And as a result, you can get great things done if you motivate people to do great things. You can't get great things done if you just expect them to happen. And it requires emotional intelligence to do that, because every person has a unique characteristic. And those of us who've run session meetings understand that everybody comes at it from a different point of view, and somehow you got to make them come together on the same issue.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Anyone else? Anything you want to add at this point? All right. Well, let's get back to it and look at the next section. All right. So Goldman and Boyatzis are going to argue that emotional intelligence skills make all the difference between adequate leaders and outstanding leaders. So I want to take a minute to read a little bit of this to you from the book, because I think this will help you see not just how they've done their research, but also what they've discovered and why their work is so important. All right, to review our earlier work, they say, a significant part of the competence research base we rely on stems from a then radical proposal made back in 1973 by the late Harvard professor David McClelland. Writing in the flagship psychology journal, McClelland proposed that if an organization wanted to hire or promote the best person for a specific job, such as a leadership position, it should discard what were then the standard criteria. Instead of testing people for their IQ, for their technical skills or personality, or just looking at their resumes, McClelland proposed first studying employees who were already outstanding performers in that job and systematically comparing them with those who were just average at the job. That analysis yields not just the threshold abilities for the position, which by that they mean the basic skills everybody has to have to do the job. But more important, the distinguishing competencies, abilities that the stars exhibited and the average performers did not. Then, said McClellan, choose people who have those same competencies or help your people develop those strengths. That proposal spawned what is today's standard practice in world-class organizations, developing a leadership competency model to identify, train, and promote likely stars. Take, for example, the leadership competence model developed by Lyle Spencer, a longtime associate of McClellan, for an industrial controls firm. They were a $2 billion global division of Siemens with 400 branches in 56 countries. So obviously the research has been done in very large areas and is helpful all the way down. The first step was to identify the pool of star leaders whose growth in revenues and return on sales put their performance in the top 10 to 15%. Next, the stars were compared with managers whose performance was only average. And the two groups underwent intensive interviews designed to assess their competencies. 4 competencies of emotional intelligence, but not a single technical or purely cognitive competency, emerged as the unique strengths of the stars. And these were the 4 that emerged: the drive to achieve results, the ability to take initiative, skills in collaboration and teamwork, and the ability to lead teams. So then they, with a clear idea of which EI competencies to target, another pool of branch managers was trained to cultivate those strengths they identified. And they became familiar with and were evaluated on each competence. And they set goals for improving those competencies and thereby their business performance. The result was that the leaders increased their effectiveness and reaped significantly improved profits. The revenue growth in their branches that year added an additional $1.5 million profit, double that of a comparison group who had no training. Now, I wanted to read this because it's really easy for us to say, oh, well, that's the business world. But I want to talk about how we think that might apply to our leadership in churches. And it's not just us as leaders, but it's also the leaders that we work with as volunteers within our congregations. What did you hear in there that might be relevant or helpful towards your leadership and the relevance of emotional intelligence skills?
I think one of the things that I heard, or what my brain was thinking as you were reading that, is just really thinking about the importance of the church leadership, like how your nominating committee chooses leaders, or how your leadership positions are filled. If there's this mentality of, full session or full deacons, like we just need bodies or something, how toxic that can be and bleed into the productivity of the team work. And yeah, how do you keep that from happening? Or how do you work with that, or shift from that, or grow from that? So sorry if I totally got sidetracked, but that's where my brain went when you were reading that, is just acknowledging like the importance of, communicating well, like what a leadership role in a church is, and in getting people in those positions who understand the importance of them serving and being part of that team.
I think that's an excellent point, Jen. And it's one of the reasons that I choose as a pastor to work with my nominating committee rather than set them on their own, because what you just said about expectations of what we're looking for in our leaders makes a big difference. And I'd rather get people on board who have a place to use their best skills and feel good about it, and to have positive contributions to make towards the overall leadership of the congregation. And that's a big question. How do we help do that? And because we're not always going to have enough people who have the skills, how do we help them gain those? So that's going to be part of what we come back to as we talk about the organizational component of this later. But thank you. That's a wonderful connection. Really great. Other thoughts some of you have about connections?
Well, that brings up an excellent point, especially for small churches. Now, in small churches, the pastor has to become a coach, because you don't have, for example, I was on a session of a much larger church, and our session members were dentists and the captain of the Coast Guard and a lawyer, and we had a guy who ran his own, was president of a multi-station company and so on. And another one was the vice president of finance. So, leadership skills were kind of already there, if you will. And in a small church, they may not be there. In a small church, what often happens is the session ends up with the people who are the best doers. And they're not necessarily leaders. There's a big difference between the two. And so that's that whole point about finding out what makes a good leader and leading those people in that direction somehow, that is critical. Because if you don't do that, what happens is they lapse back into whatever they're good at, like bootlicking, whatever they're good at, and that's as far as they'll go. And unfortunately, the world is changing way too fast to allow that to happen.
And we have a lot of things going on in our world today and in our culture that are so divisive, that means that our leaders need to be prepared to handle potential division in our congregations and respond to it appropriately and well. So that's something else that not everybody is ready for. Yeah. Okay. Other connections?
That in the social media, internet, and all that kind of thing. When you have an older church, they poo-poo that stuff. But if you're going to get new members, you have to have that as part of your culture.
It certainly can be helpful. Yeah. Okay. Any other connections you want to talk about at the moment, or questions that you have? Okay. All right. So I want to just summarize what I feel like they said within that section and beyond in the book. Outstanding leaders have in their research at least one strength area within each of the dimensions of emotional intelligence. And there I listed the 4 again so we can remember them. So being aware of what's going on in yourself, knowing yourself well, and being able to regulate, manage, and control your emotions, your instincts, your impulses is instrumental, because what it does is create the space for you to be intentional, for you to choose how to lead. And so as a leader, this is why emotional intelligence really matters. We may have all the best thoughts in the world and be able to logically think through and figure out how to best help our congregations. But if we are not able to be aware of what's going on in ourselves and manage that, we can't create the space to choose how we're going to lead. And we've got to be able to be intentional, because every situation may require a different approach to leadership, or at least some of them will. Leadership style is partly about our abilities that are already within us, what God has given us, and it's also learned skills. And so we need to be ready to learn all the way along and to receive feedback from others on how we're doing and what we can improve. So that's what makes emotional intelligence such a different factor is and I love the fact that they are very clear about technical competencies did not make the difference between good leaders and bad leaders. What made the difference was all of these soft skills that we don't often raise up or that we take for granted that people will have. The other thing I want to be sure to emphasize here is that IQ is kind of, it is static. It's what we have. Emotional intelligence, which is either EQ or EI, depending on what you hear, all of it can be learned as long as we are open and ready to learn it. And it can also be taught to our leaders in our congregations so that we can help bring everybody along with this in our congregations as we go. All right, so our next section is going to be on leadership styles. We're going to look at the 6 leadership styles from Primal Leadership, but at the moment, I think I would like to take a break, give us a chance to stretch, take a bathroom break. I'm going to get some more water. My fall allergies have kicked in, so I'm trying to make sure I minimize any of that that you will have to suffer through. So let's take a little break and come back around 10:20. How's that? Okay. All right. Thank you all.
I cannot be away from you.
Materially. Okay, so coming back from our break, I want to be able to talk to us about the leadership styles. And as we do this, I'd like you to be thinking about a couple of dimensions. First, I want you to be thinking about your leadership style, because as we go through the 6, you're going to find yourself in more than one, is my guess. Okay. It is not, and I want to be clear that when they lay out these leadership styles, they're very clear that you can learn them, that you're going to have aspects of more than one already in you, and that you may need to use them situationally depending on what is true in your organization. And so as you think, you're going to want to be looking at as to where do I see myself? I also want you to be thinking a little bit about what's needed in my organization now. Like whether or not this is my leadership style, is this what might be needed? And therefore I could be learning some of this. And then you may notice ways that emotional intelligence impacts each of these. I'm going to be showing you each one, and then we'll talk about which ones are most effective and in what circumstances after we go through them. Okay. Please do stop with questions, comments at any point in time. I designed these to be highly interactive, and yet I never know how our group is going to be. And so I encourage you to be as interactive as you'd like. with us. Okay. All right, let me go now to see if I can get it into the slideshow mode. And of course, it put the control bar right there. There you go. Okay, here we are. So the 6 leadership styles are visionary, coaching, affiliative, democratic, pace setting, and commanding. And even from the names, you'll be able to see some of the things that we've already referenced this morning coming up. So let's delve into each one a little bit more. All right, so the visionary. A visionary leader is ready to guide the organization to high levels. They're going to be able to look into the future, see where the organization needs to go, and be able to articulate that in a way that people understand, can latch onto, and get excited about. With a visionary leader, they often give people the freedom to figure out how to implement the vision, and even to be to take risks and be less planned sometimes in how to get there, which is exciting to people. A visionary leader gets people on board and empowers them, which people, those who love visionary leaders, really, really respond to. And people who are part of that vision then see, okay, so this is how my gift in this fits. And this is how I can be part of where we're headed. And it excites their sense of purpose and meaning in what they do and in where the whole organization is headed. It also generally helps engage what's in the employees' or volunteers' best interests. They really see a resonance, we might say, between the vision that the leader is setting out and their own lives, which helps it be a longer lasting kind of thing. So very empowering. Now, the warning that that Goldman and Boyatzis and McKee give us here is that the vision can't be seen as arrogant. It can't be seen as not anything like the organization. It can't be seen as not connecting. It has to actually make sense and resonate with the organization's identity and culture, and take the organization where it needs to go. So the emotional intelligence competencies that are under this are inspirational leadership, self-awareness and authenticity, and empathy. And you're going to see empathy is in most of these. It's needed almost everywhere, but especially here, then the other two take a higher lead. Any questions or comments about the visionary style?
I guess the thing that that resonates with me is with nonprofits, especially churches, the visionary has to relate to the vision of the organization. I've seen too many leaders that have their own personal vision and try to impose that on the rest of the group. And as a result, the group doesn't go anywhere. It kind of just, it's like being in a boat without a rudder. For example, I've been in Presbytery meetings where we cared more about global warming than we did about evangelism, for example. Which is part of the vision. And that when you have that, that means all the components that make up whatever it is you're leading don't mesh. Because they feel, well, if we're going to talk about this, then why do I care about what I've been doing? And that's the self-awareness, the empathy, the inspirational leadership. The inspiration has to go where the vision of the organization says it needs to go.
Okay. And that indicates too, I'm just going to state, it may be obvious, Wayne, but I'm going to state that the organization needs to have an identity and a vision. in order for the leader to come to it. And if you don't, that's kind of where you have to start. Yeah. All right, Jen, you had a comment also or a question?
Yeah. I was thinking about just how a leader, how important it is for a leader to invite people into reaching the vision. I think groups or churches can be excited about that vision identity, but then they're just kind of flapping around like, yeah, get us there. So whatever that is, yeah.
I think if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're talking about is that the vision needs feet on the ground. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That there has to be a way to put it into action and place, and to get people not just excited, but willing to give themselves as part of it, as contributing to making it happen. And that
Yeah.
goes back to Wayne's ownership too, I think. Mhm.
And I think just on a personal level, I've seen myself as a leader, like working to get, you know, to the vision of whatever an idea or a brainstorming session revealed, and then end up doing far too much of the work because, you know, people were on board with that vision or that idea to support the vision, but then the work wasn't there. And, you know, just for me personally, like I noticed, like I need to be able more to let go of doing that work and just saying, well, great work getting to that point, but it just didn't happen because of the lack of the feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I think you're making a really strong argument for the fact that you need multiple aspects of leadership styles to be able to take something from conception to completion. So I'd like you to invite you to hold that question and concern that you're raising, and let's see what other styles might help complete, bring to completion what you're talking about. Yeah. All right, anyone else before we move to the next one? I think we get excited about the visionary leader. That's that might be who we aspire to be, but be thinking about it, and I'll ask you at the end if you have one you wish you could cultivate more than another. All right, so the next is coaching, and we talked already about how coaching and mentoring is one of the skills that we think excellent leaders have, and how it is part of emotional intelligence. So a coaching leadership style focuses on employees in deep ways. So having the conversations that engage employees, figuring out what makes them tick, what motivates them, how they can become their best self, their best employee, and enhance not just their work skills, but their personal skills as well. So it's less about, is the task done, and more about how is the person, the employee, the volunteer growing and becoming more competent through the task completion and through the growth process. So you might be spending time with people, helping identify their strengths and weaknesses, developing that long-term plan for their goals. And you're going to encourage staff and volunteers to really take on what excites them, to stretch and learn and grow in new directions, because you are about where you're going, but you're more about who's getting you there and how, and helping them really feel that they're part of things. So obviously, if you are not a good employee motivator, you're not going to be a good coach. Right? There's a real warning there. And you can't use this to come down on an employee hard. This is not the performance improvement plan kind of thing. This is not to be used with a volunteer who you're so frustrated with, you just wish they would take a break and decide that they need to step back for a while. This is the kind of style that you use when you have people that you see such wonderful things in, whether or not they see it in themselves. And you want to help show them and coach them into how they can really be making a huge difference in our church with the goodness that they bring. So this is emotional self-awareness within ourselves, because we need to know our own stuff before we can coach someone else. And it's also empathy, of being able to really understand and share space with that person that you're coaching, that employee or that volunteer, and help them become their best self. So it's both of those things, to be able to recognize what's in them. So what do you think about, where do you see connections with coaching as a leadership skill needed and style needed within the church? This may not be one we think about normally with the church.
As part of my CRE training, I had a mentor. I'll call her Pastor Jane. She has since, unfortunately, been called home. But when she was a pastor, the first thing she always did was take a look out and see what skills people had in their skill banks, and identify what those skills were, and try to utilize those things in the direction that the church needed to go. And where there were weaknesses, then she would do some coaching. My first senior pastor had a 400-member church, and he was the only pastor there. And he had to be excellent at that, because he had to develop people to do those kinds of things. Right. And they recognize that certain people have skills that you need to move in a certain direction. For example, one year he ended up with the evangelism committee with 2 introverts. And he recognized that. He knew that he had 2 introverts, so he had to get some more people on there that were willing to talk to other people. And, that's the coaching part. You have to be able to recognize what you have and then utilize what can be. And I remind myself of that, because when I worked for the steel company, I got this guy. This is my little coaching reminder. It's very heavy, and so it sits by my desk because I can't move it anywhere. But it's one person talking in the ear of someone lower. And that's what you have to be able to do sometimes. And I'll share this one last thing with you. I was involved in something called a relaunch, and I was the rookie. And they asked me what skills I had, and I wrote them all down. And the head of it said, you're going to be in charge of building and grounds. I said, I don't know a doggone thing about building and grounds. He said, come to my house and we'll talk. So I went to his house, and he said, what you have on this committee is a builder, an architect, somebody who knows painting, a carpenter, and all these people. The one thing they don't have is a leader. And they need you to pull them together, to manage the budget, to prioritize the tasks, and do all of those things, and just let them do it. And I said, well, I'm a lot younger than they are. He says, well, you know what? In order to be CEO, you can't start when you're 60. He says, you got to start somewhere, and this is the place to start. So that was the coaching example I will always live with. That was just beautiful in my case. And the fact that he took me to his house was even more important, because now he could talk to me, as opposed to talking to me as me with other people around.
Yeah, those are some great examples, Wayne. Really connecting with someone one-on-one. That deep conversation is what you had, right? and someone who really knew his people well and what they brought and what they needed. Yeah. So do we have the time in the church to really do this kind of leadership? To look for the gifts and skills, to craft our committees and our groups in ways that help bring people along to use those. Maybe the better question is, how can we afford not to have the time? Okay. So it may not be the top leadership skill in the church, and I think it's one we need to grow into a lot more. Okay, affiliative is the third. Affiliative leadership values people, understands the feelings of the people, whether they are your staff, your volunteers, understands the emotional current that undergirds what's going on within the congregation, and provides the support that's needed, whether it's emotional, physical, any of those kinds of things. Affiliative people are really in tune as leaders to what's going on with the people that they're working with, and they want to be part of the team in ways that support everybody else. So it's nurturing relationships, it's getting past conflict to fostering really good harmony and working relationships together. And it's understanding, it's watching for burnout, really, and helping people take the time apart that they need to avoid it and to make sure that they have the space to bring their best into their work. As great as this style is, as much as it is really personally based and useful, it can't be the only style you use, because you will never have a vision to go anywhere. Also, the affiliative style is so focused on supporting people where they are that affiliative leaders sometimes tend to not want to give the bad news, to not want to give the feedback that people do need to hear in order to move in the right direction. So an affiliative leader might not be willing to say, this is a great idea you're bringing to the floor of session, and we have 5 other programs like this, and we don't have the volunteers to be able to do one more, for example. So the competence behind this are the teamwork and collaboration, hands down, empathy again, conflict management. These are the competencies that lead people to really focus on the personal relationships. This is something that is a skill of mine, for example. And I have noted very well that when I don't give the feedback and provide the standard to where we're going, we don't get anywhere. And so I've really had to learn to balance my affiliative side with other things that are also needed within the church. So your comments and questions and where you resonate with this.
The last point, valuing downtime to recover and rebuild capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I serve a small church, and one of the things that has scared me for years, it's the third one I've served, that are about the same size,
Mm-hmm.
is that there are people in this church who feel that they are the best at whatever it is we're talking about. You know, the best, building and grounds person, or the best hospitality person. And they won't give those jobs up, even though they've had them for like 30 some years.
Okay.
And you try to get other people involved, but it's like they don't want to work with other people. They want to be left alone. And I struggle with that. And I'm not sure how to handle it. But in a small church, there aren't a whole lot of other people to put there, you see. So they just sit back and let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is, unfortunately, somebody gets, knee surgery or gets cancer or has to take care of a relative or something like that, and they're gone, and everybody else tries to scramble and figure out how to do whatever it was they did.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, any advice I could get on that, I really would appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts for Wayne on this? I might, but I want to see what other people are thinking.
I know it can be hard when your pool is small, but I think fostering and supporting the idea of, not having just one person doing a committee or something that's a bigger thing, because people do, not everyone, but people do say yes or want to be involved because they are working with people, even if that's not really, even if you do things well by yourself, being part of that bigger picture, there is some significance to that. So, I think just finding the right way to say, we're doing it like this for a number of reasons. So we have more people involved. We're equipping each other, but I think that helps a little bit. But it is hard when you have a strong voice or a potential positive bully, if you will, where they just want to steamroll and do their own thing. And yeah, not sure how helpful that is, but I think there really needs to be a way to spread things out, so that we're not dependent on that one strong person.
Okay. Anyone else some input for Wayne?
I've had some success. A lot of these folks that have been in positions for a long time often talk pretty loudly about how they're very tired and they want someone else to pick this up while also sort of beating everybody back with a stick. And I've had some luck with just celebrating their retirement with them. You know, and sometimes sort of it's a little bit like against their will, like because again, it's been this push and pull. I mean, they really are. I mean, I find most of them are really sort of well-meaning servants of the church, and they're so afraid that if they drop it, no one will pick it up and this thing will die. And so sometimes, sometimes I can have that conversation with them of like, if this is really something that we, the church, are doing, it can't just be you. And if you do let it go and it doesn't continue, that will be sad. And also maybe what we have decided as a body. But being able to work with them, and sometimes, like I said, you throw them a retirement party. And then see sort of what develops. I preached, when I was a pastor, I preached Sabbath a lot. And of course, sometimes like with trepidation that the people that we really relied on would come to me and say, like, it's time for my Sabbath. I didn't mean you. I meant, but like, if we really believe that, and we believe that the church is not just made up of one or two core leaders, like we ought to be able to survive those folks stepping out, even for a season. But yeah, it's hard, especially when they're actively complaining and not passing it to anyone.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, I think what I would add, Wayne, is that I see the gift of the affiliative style as being able to lean into those folks and what they're feeling. And that's part of what Barry's referring to, right? Is to celebrate and to acknowledge that what they're doing is important to them. And so many times I think our volunteers in the church need to be needed. They need to know that they're important, that's part of what increases their staying power and their willingness to give. And sometimes what I do is I turn it around and say, and our newer folks who are interested and here, if we don't give them that same thing, they won't stay. They will evaporate. And so we've got to find a way to make a place for them. And it might be that you coach and mentor them for a while. It might be that you give them a chance to make their way on their own. who knows what it is, but leaning into that affiliative there, what my guess is that there are tons of feelings underneath that reluctance to step aside. And to acknowledge those helps. And I love Barry's suggestion of celebrating retirement, because that is a very effective way to say thank you and to say we're moving on. Yeah.
I had a professor in the seminary where we threw 3 retirement parties until he got the hint.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
One thing I was thinking about too is I think it's hard when you're trying to communicate to people who are doing great work the importance of, letting other people be involved or have bigger roles in that ministry or what's happening. And they almost like take offense to it, like, oh, well, you don't appreciate what I'm doing. And so I have found it tricky at times to really articulate, like, no, you're super amazing, but we want other super amazing people too. Or, we have people who want to be involved in this, but because you're so overpowering, they don't feel needed or whatever. So how can you step back a little to include more people? That is a hard conversation, and something I think I struggle with doing well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of this, I think we've got to lean into people's feelings underneath it, because that's where whatever is blocking, I'm convinced, lives. That's where we need to explore, and that's what makes this style so valuable, because it can go into those places and explore people's feelings and what's going on with them and help to honor that. And it can offer an invitation to something different. Tabitha, did you have anything you wanted to contribute?
So on that same topic, on the valuing downtime, mine's kind of the exact opposite in a way. Not necessarily people not wanting to step away, but people not wanting to step into positions. Being a small congregation, we average membership rolls about 30 people, but weekly attendance is about 7 to 10. And our session currently is members of 5. And I've got 2 members right now on an extension letter approved. So they've already done the book of order terms and they're on an extension letter. And the one gal will retire. Well, her extension will be up this year. And everyone's like, well, ask her to go. Like, no, we're on like year 9. Like, at what point, or how do you, as a pastor, how do I come in without being overbearing and say, no, enough's enough. She needs a break, like, how do you walk that line, that fine line, and still be authoritative, but not, I don't know. That's where I struggle. So it's kind of like the opposite, it's like we don't have the people stepping into those positions, and so the people are just staying in there because they feel obligated because nobody else will do it.
Yes. And I've had to have a conversation with a treasurer one time. We said, I've told everybody I'm stepping down as soon as we can find a replacement, and we still haven't found one. I said, you just need to step down. You need to be done, set a date, honor it. And that's how it will happen. Tabitha, I'm sorry, that's a big challenge as well. What it sounds like, I'm still going to say, I feel like this affiliative style gives a whole lot of grace there, but it's a different conversation. It feels to me like a conversation with the whole congregation to say, here's where we are, right? Let's acknowledge some of what's going on here. We have people who are tired. We have people who have served their time. We have people who are concerned about having people to serve and yet don't see a way for them to. And all of this is linked to some very real fears and feelings we have under this. And what are those? You know, I'm guessing, I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing there are a whole lot of survival pieces underneath this, right? Fear of being able to survive and go on. And sometimes, again, just leaning into the feelings, leaning into the personal relationships, allows us to surface these other things. This is why you don't use this style alone, but this is why this style is probably one of the most underappreciated. Because when you actually open the door and have the conversation and are courageous enough to say, all of our actions come from what's going on underneath it all, both in us and in our church dynamics. So let's open it up and let's see what's there. Let's talk about it. Even if it's really hard, even if it's scary to say it, let's try that. Because the more we nurture our relationships and we're open and honest about what's going on, the more we might have a chance to figure out a way forward. Because what we're learning is we can't do this alone. And that may be part of what your folks feel, Tabitha, is, oh my gosh, this is a huge burden. This person's used to it, but I could never do this. I couldn't take on being the one person. Where I see that is my churches that have a few young families will usually lose the young families because they feel like they're the ones who are required to show up for everything that's done for young families, and they just can't take the pressure. It's too much. And so they just disappear. So you may be able to come up with creative ways. I mean, I have people sharing a deacon position right now. I have one elder supporting other elders in a lot of the administrative tasks that he finds easy and they don't, but they have the other skills that are needed in that elder position. And so he helps them with the administrative parts. We've had to come up with some creative ways, and I'm a church of 135. But the key is we've talked about it first. So I don't know how, that may not give a whole lot of comfort to any of you, but I think that's what's underlying a lot of this, is get it out on the table and talk about it. And then I guess, Tabitha, I hope you have support from your committee on ministry as to what's next based on what you hear, because that could be a rough point, and that's where I would want to come alongside and offer you support. Because based on what you hear, there may be some real questions that have to be explored for your congregation. But to go in with the love and to be able to say, you know, if I were your position, I might feel like this, or I might feel like that, or I might wonder about this or wonder about that, gives them permission and freedom to speak what's really going on. And that is emotional intelligence skills. It is leadership skills completely. So now that I've said what I'm thinking about this, would anyone else like to respond to Tabitha and share some wisdom? All right, well, I'll interpret this as either I said something decent or we're all stuck in the same spot. All right, so keep raising the questions, and Tabitha, I'll try to look at other places where we can come back to this throughout our time today, okay? All right, democratic leadership style, seeking buy-in and consensus. It's being able to work with people to figure out what's important to them, what they need to get out of something, what they can easily compromise on. It's looking for where their commitment is, what they're most excited about, and what they're willing to put their energy behind. So this may be part of your conversation too, Tabitha, is maybe that there needs to be a greater sense of buy-in and excitement about what's going on. Who knows? The democratic leadership style does help people get involved with how to implement the vision. It helps bring their ideas to the forefront, fresh ideas as well as currently serving. And is able to help put everything out on the table for people to look at and work with. So there are truths that we need to hear. There are fresh approaches that we need to hear. And I feel like the democratic leadership style is pretty realistic, which is helpful. It gives that safe environment to say, we can look at anything here. We can be a group together and know that no matter what we put out there, it is not the end of the world, and we can work on this together. Now, you can't do this in a crisis, because talking to everybody and figuring out what they're excited about and what they're willing to commit to and what their ideas are doesn't work when you have a crisis. You need to figure out what to do, and you need to move forward. This is a wonderful consensus building leadership style in the right time frame and the right circumstances. So you can see it's about teamwork and collaboration. It manages conflict well, because you're figuring out what everybody is willing to go to bat for and what they can let slide, so that you can bring some good compromise together. Influence is huge in this. If you've got trust as a leader, then you're able to influence in places along this leadership style that helps get people on board. And of course, your empathy. Again, I think empathy is required for all of these. It's really helpful. So questions, thoughts about the democratic piece and style of leadership?
Well, from the very beginning, we are Presbyterians. Our culture is, I win, you lose. That's the way we run things. We put everything to a vote, and whoever gets more votes wins. Very little, on major issues, there's very little consensus building going on. When Bruce raised Chow, I asked about that. I said, how can we talk about kindness and all these things if we continue to embrace a model where I win and you lose? And when you go to conflict school, you learn anytime you use I win and you lose, the one thing you are certain to lose is the value of the relationship.
Mm.
And so you're trying to do this in a culture that is counter to what we're talking about here. And, you can probably get away with it on the local level, but when you get to presbytery level, it gets a little harder. And at the General Assembly level, there's no consensus at all. I've been a commissioner. You put things up to a vote and that's it. There's no talking or anything going on. So it's hard to build this sort of thing in a culture that flies against it. Again, it's been something I've struggled with for 30 years. I'm not sure how to handle it.
Yeah. You've got to actually, I think when you've got to use the room in our polity that there is to allow a lot of consensus building and discussion ahead of bringing things to a vote. Because you're right, once we get into the areas of where Robert's Rules takes over and how we organize our meetings, we're kind of beyond that point. So the question is, how do you use the time before that to work on that? So I'll give you an example. Right now in my congregation, we are doing strategic planning. This congregation, as I said, had been through a lot of conflict. It is more than 5 years in the rearview mirror. They've brought in the Lombard Mennonite Peace Center. They did a whole lot of work on how to move ahead and manage conflict. And they are a very progressive and excited church. They like being involved. They are really caring people. And so looking at all that, I thought, okay, well, yes, we've got two things here. We've got a church that needs to come back from conflict well, and we need to be ready for when the next one happens, and it will. And then we've got to really look at how we corral this church into action that's based on the new mission and vision statement they just wrote before I arrived. So strategic planning has been good, and it's been a lot about this kind of process. It's been about democratic leadership, about helping people both on the team, on the task force that's doing the planning. And now we have some smaller groups or some other groups that are working in each area that we've identified as a potential way forward. and they are generating and working and figuring out how we might bring that specific idea to life. And that is a way that we are seeing a whole lot of this democratic leadership style work, because there is a focus, it's anchored to the mission and vision of the church, and yet one of our ideas is a wellness and reconciliation center. What does that mean for a church? What does that look like? How does it have impact in the community? And so I had 13 people join that group who are all excited to figure out what that could look like as a church being present in the community to promote spiritual and other aspects of wellness and how to reconcile with each other. So I think you've got to figure out the ways that are outside and around our polity, not that they're ignoring it, but to foster that, so that then when we bring it back into the polity, ultimately our church is going to take a vote on what idea or ideas we're advancing. We will get there. But the running up to it work is where we're generating the excitement and the ideas and really giving people a place to contribute. So hopefully that helps a little. Right. Other thoughts or comments about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, to me, this first bullet point is so essential to this. The seeks buy-in and consensus through conversation and inspiring commitment. I mean, I've certainly seen what Wayne's talking about, and I can think about a couple of general assemblies where that's what it looked like. Or presbytery meetings or session meetings where, like we just beat each other up until somebody won, which isn't helpful.
Nope.
But then, I also, there was a beautiful moment at this last assembly where, we were debating, the second half of Polity 1, which was, I mean, pretty tense. And an amendment was offered to say, because originally that piece of it had said, to ask anybody that is being examined for ordination or installation about their commitment to our unity and diversity. And someone who was very much, I mean, he stood up and identified himself, as a openly gay, I think, ruling elder from a congregation, and said, this sort of how we live out our commitment to unity and diversity is important to me. But also, like, I'm hearing from my conservative, brothers and sisters, like, the historic commitment to the right of conscience is also super important, right? Like, how do we live in the balance of, our right to disagree and, our commitment to unity? And offered an amendment, that clarified, that language, that we ask about both of those things and have a conversation about, and it went from a vote that was really tense to, like, overwhelmingly approved by the body. And that happened through the debate on the floor. And there's plenty of sort of tense fallout afterwards about what that's going to mean and all these sorts of things. But, at least in that moment, like, the body sort of worked through it to create buy-in. And I think our polity can be a winner takes all system. But when we're doing that at our best, I think we're asking ourselves, what's good for the body? And not necessarily what do I think we should do personally, but what do I think we should do in a way that builds up the work of the church.
Thank you, Barry. That's amazing. This is why I love going to General Assembly, because you do have those moments that just restore your faith in so much. But as I'm thinking about what you've said, and I'm thinking about the conversations we've just had about when people are willing to, are holding on to positions, and when people aren't willing to step up, I wonder about, you need that leader who will step up and open the door to something new, to some option, and to the recognition of things. And that this leadership style fits that as well. How do we generate the conversation around those questions in a safe and non-threatening way to allow us to put it out there and to identify all of the things that we value And what I loved best about what you said, what is best for the whole church? It's greater than just me and what I can take on or not, or what I want and don't. What is best for the whole church here? And that's something we need to remember is part of it. Yeah. Okay, this is great. Thank you. Let's get to the fifth one. This is the pace-setting leadership style. The pace-setting leader holds very high standards for performance for themselves and expects everyone else to do the same. So a pace-setting leader is going to identify where the challenges are with folks who aren't necessarily holding their end, and is going to try to help them or just do it for them, one or the other. One of the warnings about pace setting is that it can really reduce morale, because if you're setting a pace that nobody can keep up with, or that a lot of people can't keep up with, you're going to wear people out and they're going to feel not appreciated. So it can build anxiety, which reduces that natural bent of people to be creative and excited and to spawn ideas of how to put things out there. They're going to kind of hold back and wait for the leader to push them or tell what the leader says he or she wants. So the idea is that pace setting can be very helpful, but it needs to be used sparingly. If you've got a crisis in front of you or a situation where you really have to push, use it. But don't use it as a permanent style. So this reflects achievement orientation. It still reflects empathy and emotional self-awareness, because the pace setter really is putting their own stuff out for everybody. And so you have to be aware of what you're holding up and how much a part of it is for you, and how it's not going to apply to everybody else. So this one, I think, really can be on the edge. It can be helpful and it can be harmful. And you really have to be thoughtful and intentional about how you use this style of leadership. Any questions or comments on this one?
Again, what I've found in the churches I've served and in the presbytery I serve, one of the hardest things for any church to do is to put measurable goals and expectations out there that determine whether we're meeting the mission or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a great reluctance to do that. We just, this is our vision, this is our mission, and we're going to work toward it. Well, how do we know if we're making any progress or not? When I took over this church, they put an administrative commission on us because they were trying to figure out whether we were valuable or not, or whatever. So I set up, worked with them, and I set up 6 goals. Everything from, the church attendance to financials to, how many bags of food we gave out as a food program every month, and how well that was going, and a couple of others. And I found out they were very, very resistant to being measured.
Mm-hmm.
They just presume that since we're a church, all these things are happening, who cares? But I've also found out that if you don't do that, the church will eventually fail. And that's because you end up with the same old and no forward movement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still struggling with that one, but I have enough skills, I hope, that I'll turn it around someday.
Yeah, I think goals are important, Wayne. I agree with that. And the right goals are important. So in our strategic planning, we started out by talking about membership numbers, and really realized that that was going to be so easy to fail on, that if we set that up as a key goal, it was going to be demoralizing rather than empowering for our people. And so we're working on a different way to put our goals in place that can be measured and achieved and celebrated, but it's much more realistic for what is likely to come. Mm-hmm. Okay. Seeing no one else, let me move on to the last one. The last one is commanding. A commanding leader demands compliance without expectation of why. Commanding leaders tend to exercise control. They tend to look at where the problems are and how to solve them. And that problem focus can turn into too much of a focus on only the bad stuff and not the good stuff. So that, again, morale and spirit can be hard to maintain under a commanding leader. Commanding leaders get things done, and commanding leadership is an eroding type of leadership over time. And so this is, again, one that they say use it, but use it in the right manner and temporarily only. So when there needs to be accountability, when there's a crisis, when big changes need to happen, sometimes you need to have commanding leadership for a while, but not forever. So this is influence. They're only going to follow a commanding leader if you have that influence built. Achievement orientation, initiative, but to make sure that you do this sensitively, you've got to also have your emotional self-awareness, your empathy, your self-control and management to make sure that this style, again, doesn't go off the edge or the deep end. Okay. Any comments or questions on this one? All right, so I want to give us a moment here to talk and reflect a little. So we have, and I'm going to condense this. I'm going to hide my video because I don't want to. All right, there we go. Make sure you can see all of this. So we have the 6 styles of leadership. The impact goes from most highly positive to potentially negative on the pace setting and commanding. We've talked a little bit about when they're appropriate, each style. So I'd like you to take a few moments and jot down where you see yourself as a leader, what styles are most you, what styles do you use, and then also think about what styles you'd like to learn. And then the last thing is to think about what style your church needs or your ministry place needs most right now. So we're going to take a few moments quietly, probably 2 or 3 minutes, to give you a chance to reflect on that. Which styles are most you? Which styles do you wish to learn? And which styles does your church or ministry setting need most right now? And then in a moment, I'll ask those of you who are willing to share a little bit about what you're learning, where you see yourself, and so forth. Okay. So let's talk for a few moments. What are you noticing? Where did you see yourself in leadership? You can answer any of the three questions: what you saw, where you see yourself, what you want to learn in leadership style, and what you think your church or ministry setting needs most.
I'll go.
Okay.
So, I see myself in the visionary field.
Mhm.
I would like to learn aspects of all of the rest of them.
Okay.
And then I think that my church needs affiliative, democratic, and commanding, as we need to make decisions about how our churches will continue in the future. Both of our congregations are very small and their finances are dwindling. So they're both at a point where they're trying to determine where we go next. So possible merger, possible closing, things like that. So I think that those are the three areas that would best fit my church at this moment.
I think that's wonderful insight, Tabitha, from what you're telling. The commanding says you've got to make decisions, but if you don't use the affiliative and the democratic first, you're not going to get everything out of the table. So I commend you. I think that's great. And I would guess you probably have more than just visionary aspects to you already. That's my full faith and guess. Thank you. Who else would like to share? Any or all of those?
Well, personally, I've been working on trying to be a coach,
Mhm.
because that's the skills that I thought, that best influenced me.
Mhm.
I'm trying to be affiliative, and in some ways, I'm trying to be democratic to get away from the I win, you lose.
Mhm.
Obviously, the big need for all small churches is to be more visionary.
Mhm.
They're stuck in the old saying, it's kind of hard that when you're being nipped at by alligators, that your original plan was to drain the swamp. That's where a lot of them are at now. As far as the church is concerned, they need to learn how to be more visionary themselves.
Mhm.
Okay, they're so stuck in how things are, and they can lament about, I don't understand why certain things aren't happening. And they also need to have to start moving in that direction.
Mhm.
They seem to think that the pastor is the only prime mover in the whole congregation, and you got to get away from that. And the other thing that it just dawned on me, I went over and I got it. There's one management style. I know this is backwards, but Ken Blanchard wrote a book, Lead Like Jesus,
Mhm.
and that talks about servant leadership. And I've been trying to read that and figure out where this fits in this whole thing. Because the way he writes this book is that that's the only management style you can have, and I don't believe that. But he's, like I said, he says it's lessons from the greatest leadership role model of all time,
Mhm.
and I think he's right there. So somewhere along the line, servant leadership, from the pastoral point of view, fits into emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And thanks to the session today, I think I'm beginning to see how.
Good.
And so that's another point. But small churches need to start thinking about what Tabitha said before. What about the future?
Mhm.
We can't keep doing what we're doing, because what we're doing ain't working.
No, no, it's not. It's not working in terms of survival. It's also not working in terms of discipleship, of
Exactly. And
of
stewardship
helping
and a whole lot of
people.
other things.
Mhm. Right, right. Okay. Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate your sharing. Yeah, you've got some very good thoughts and directions there. Okay. Anyone else?
I can share.
Mhm.
So I think probably I am visionary, but at a pace setting style, maybe, I'm not sure. And I definitely want, like Tabitha said, to learn pieces of other leadership. I see the value in all of them, and just being able to identify which style is needed and to bring that to the table. And our organization needs, I think, needs coaching and affiliate, or affiliative. I think there's maybe too much visionary in the fact that big ideas with no action or no work or no even like a hard conversation of great idea, but let's talk about what steps we need to take to get there, or what the work of being that looks like. And then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, maybe that's not the greatest place for us, because that sounds exhausting, or, well, I'm not doing that, or, okay, then we can't have this vision if we're not doing that.
So you're looking to balance with an anchor to reality.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight.
And just like one little example is, oh, we want young families in church. We want young families at our church. Okay, so we can't make them leave worship. So let's look at that. People are used to, well, kids leave during worship. We don't have kids in worship. Okay, do we need to rethink that? Do we need to talk about, this vision that you want? Yeah.
How has the culture changed to where what you think is the way it is really isn't anymore? And so we don't appear to be the welcoming place that we think we are. I think those are some great discussions to bring up and things to work around with goals.
So is the leadership style to do that, is that coaching or affiliative, or maybe I'm identifying it wrong?
I would say you might need some democratic in that.
Okay.
Because that's the one that really brings up the hard questions and creates the space and time to talk about them and to figure out, to launch some new ideas, to launch some different ways to see it and see what you can get commitment and buy-in to. But underneath it, I still think you're going to need some affiliative, because you're going to have to deal with the underlying feelings and assumptions that are there in a caring and compassionate way. I guess it's kind of like you've got to punch the wall a little bit and break it up to create something new, and yet you've got to do it in a good and kind way.
Right. And I feel like, I get caught up in the frustration of, for myself, I'm trying to have this bigger, little bit harder conversation, and then people get stuck on these little details. And, for example, like just having children be worship leaders, and what does that look like? And, having them do that. And then on the worship committee, people are like, well, the acolyte is wearing shorts and a hoodie. That's inappropriate. Can't we put robes on them? And I'm like, really? Like, thank you. They're serving. They're here. They're in our service. And I'm just like, forget it.
Yeah. So
those feelings
you are describing a moment similar to what Tabitha was describing in a different direction, right? Is okay, well, nobody wants to serve. So we have a hard question we need to ask here. What matters most to you? What matters most? What are you willing, what are the must-haves, and what are you willing to give up? And can you come to see things differently than what you do? And some of that, I'm going to say, for a few of these situations, you may need to create a culture first that normalizes naming your emotions. We're not good at that as Presbyterians. We are really not. It's why, we don't get all excited. And, when they were dancing and moving at General Assembly, it was a big deal. And I go, well, let's be happy. Let's be excited. Let's name it. It's okay. But the negative ones are particularly hard. And so some of you may need to really work at cultivating first on doing it yourself. I'm kind of nervous at this moment. I'm anxious because I don't know what's going to happen if we change things. And yet I also am anxious that the church isn't going to go anywhere if we don't. So if we start naming those things and normalizing some of that, that can help. And that is somewhat of an affiliative style. But it's also visionary because you're showing something that needs to be there to help move the church forward. So yeah, I think you may need a little bit of a lot of things in your situation, Jen. And I think you're doing a good job of looking to see what's possible, which is great. And I think for all of you, there would be possible follow-up training pieces that you could do. And I'll try to recommend some of those after we're done if you're interested and want to stay on for a minute and talk. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you for all of you are doing great hard work and thinking about it. Barry, anything you want to share? I may be a little different as a Presbytery exec. I want to honor that. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think, probably the places that I lead from most are affiliative and democratic and pace setting. I'm trying to lean into coaching especially. And I think the balance between pace setting and visionary is really interesting to me. And so I'm also on the search committee for the new co-presbytery leader for Detroit.
Oh, bless you. Thank you, because we need this.
So, and so we had some good conversations about some of the sort of leadership style and what does it mean to be visionary and how can, that be positive and how can that also be destructive? And, so some of this is really helpful because I've definitely seen that be helpful. Organizations, especially our churches and presbyteries, are adapting to a world that's radically changed from what they were prepared for. And so we need that visionary leadership. And yet sometimes, we're casting a vision that does not fit who we are. It's why that needs to be paired with this affiliative democratic activity of is that vision, sometimes we're like, listen, we don't just need to go over the hill. We are currently under it. We have to cast a vision of something that's scary and different to us. And yet, if it isn't shared, it's not going to go anywhere anyway. So yeah, that's and I think to me my context, I've been trying to lean into this coaching more and more, that especially from a presbytery perspective, if I don't do it, committee chairs are pastors of their own churches or serving on sessions in their own church or whatnot,
Right.
The presbytery functions to the level in which we choose to function.
Correct.
And, which can then, and that happens in churches too, a lot, with the advantage of you see all of those people most Sundays. And can, but, from the presbytery, that's one further step removed from seeing those people on a regular basis, sitting with them in Bible study on Tuesday night, whatnot. It becomes this different, beast that's really interesting to manage as we try to cast that vision and work towards it while recognizing anybody in presbytery leadership is also in leadership at least one other thing, which has to be first. Right? It has to be first. It does me no good as a presbytery leader if a pastor's, really struggling, in their church. It doesn't matter if they're an awesome committee member for the presbytery if their church is imploding, right? That is not a net win.
Right. No, you bring up some wonderful points, and especially the nuance of context, because we have to balance things. And as I look at Detroit Presbytery, because here I am, and I can't tell you how much I miss Baltimore Presbytery, sadly. After 3 years, I know no more than a dozen other pastors.
Mm.
I have no connections in this presbytery. I have no life that sustains me.
Mm.
And the disconnection and the trauma is huge, right? So you've got to know your context. I love how you're pointing that out, because our churches each have a different context too, that we've got to harvest and really dig into and understand. And sometimes you need to go back. I'll just share briefly that one church, my first church I served, I was an associate pastor, so it was a much larger church, but there were things going on I didn't understand, and conflicts that would arise that seemed ridiculous. And then I had to read 40 years of church minutes, because we had people who were convinced they were members and they wanted to transfer, and we couldn't even find them in the membership book that they had ever been members. And so as the associate, of course, I was tasked with go find where these people are in the minutes. After reading 40 years of minutes, what I discovered is that church had a history of being uncomfortable if its size got out of control. And so every time that church got above 350 members, a fight would ensue. Somebody would incite a conflict of some sort. It would hurt the church. They'd go back to about 300 members, or a little under that, and everybody would go, and then they'd start building again. And it might have been closer to 400 members where they self-destructed. But there was, in other words, I found a pattern that helped indicate what was underneath and their behavior, and it helped identify some things. Now, could I use that a whole lot as an associate? No. And I did not have a good relationship with the senior pastor. He was in a completely different place and in his life, personally and professionally, and that was part of why that didn't work out. But the point is that sometimes we've got to find the emotional patterns underneath that lead us to understanding what's gonna help. I also wanted to share with you, as we transition to talking about how to cultivate an emotionally healthy church, that I have become convinced that you bond with a church best after you've had an emotional instance with them. So the church where I went into the first week serving, and on day 2 went to the hospital to pray with a man who was about to have surgery. And on day 3, he died. And on day 6, the first worship service I led was his funeral. That bonded me with that congregation instantly. Because whether they loved him and were horrified to lose him, or they just recognized that could be me going in for surgery and never coming out. They needed the comfort of the word. And so the Saturday worship service brought us together in a really powerful way. So we need to look for those emotional moments where, and it's not that we're manipulating them, but we're understanding the current, how they reflect the emotional currency in the congregation, and really working on that. So hopefully that was somehow relevant and pulled us through. I have just a couple more things that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a minute. Thank you all for your personal sharing. That was really wonderful and helpful. And I love the way you're thinking and what you're doing. All right, so I want to talk briefly about cultivating an emotionally healthy church. We've been talking around it the whole way, but we've really been focusing on our emotional intelligence and how we use that to move into our leadership styles, making space to choose our leadership styles because we have done our homework of understanding ourselves and what's going on inside of ourselves, and managing ourselves enough that we have that space. So having the emotionally intelligent leader is great. Like Barry can do everything he wants to get an emotionally intelligent leader for Detroit Presbytery, and he needs to. And that's not going to make Detroit Presbytery healthy. It's not going to make any of our churches healthy just because we come in as emotionally intelligent leaders. It's got to be a lot more. So I want to share with you what Goldman and Boyatzis and McKee found it takes in a business. And then let's think about, what does it take in a church to change the culture to be more emotionally healthy? So in a business, it required the leader to first take emotional intelligence training, not an overview like this, but deeper, more intense emotional intelligence training. Then for that leader to take the lessons from that, which includes leadership styles and all of that, implement what they wanted to do, really think about, where do I need to go, and implement it. And then the leader didn't just keep that to themselves, but shared with the company and the leadership team, and required all of their leaders to do it too. Okay, so it is somewhat a top down. This mattered to me. This is how it changed my leadership. You're seeing that. And so now we're all going to participate in this. That's what companies who were successful did. In those same companies, the leader paid attention to the emotional reality and the culture of their organization and tended to it. So if morale was low, the leader recognized that and did something about it. If people felt like their training was just a revolving door that never got them anywhere, then the leader realized that, changed the process, and started to put value and appreciation in that direction. In all of them, the leader connected with people's sense of purpose and created an inspiring and resonant vision that linked to the company and had a place for everybody to get involved. And then lastly, the leader lived the vision, made it real, made it active, put their feet on the ground and ran with it, and ensured that the systems in the organization actually empowered the vision instead of doing things which were contrary to the vision. So if the idea is to help people be creative and take risks, then you can't have a system that says you have to get approval from 16 levels before you're able to do something. So that's the kind of systemic change that has to empower the overall vision and hope for the emotionally healthy culture. Okay. So that's what it looked like for a business. What do you think it might look like for a church, and what interests you about kind of applying some of these ideas into your ministry where you are? This is a very quick overview, I know. So.
I think when I look at this and think about this, I feel like I'm a little bit more limited because I'm really not the leader. I'm not the pastor. I'm leading some things, or, you know, I'm the director of faith formation. So there is a leadership piece to that position, but I am definitely recognizing the challenges of really not being the leader, or maybe I'm not fully aware of how to make that not be not that I'm seeing it as a negative thing, but I think you can kind of hear what I'm saying. Like, there's a little bit of me that's saying, well, I'm not the leader, so, you know, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
But also, you know, having a leader that maybe is trying to get church leadership or its members to lead more themselves. So maybe not being leader enough to transition through that. Like, I understand the thinking behind that, but I don't see it working well.
Well, Jen, let me respond by saying that no matter what leadership position you're in a church, whether you are the top leadership position or a different one, you can make some changes that will matter. It may not be with overall whole systems and whole approach, but the way that this is modeled is the idea that the leader starts with themselves first, and then it trickles down. And I think that part you can take to heart. You can share with your team different things that you're learning about yourself and about your leadership and about how emotional intelligence aspects are so important within the church. And you can create a culture in which the team that you work with implements some of these things. Let's identify the emotions that we're feeling as we look at evaluating the programs that we have for faith formation or potentially forming more. It might be frustration, it might be excitement, it might be any of those things. You can talk about how you as a church or as a team work on the church culture that you're finding frustrating. How can we change from a but mentality to a yes but to a yes and? That's a change I've made in my language. I very rarely say yes, but anymore. I say yes, and, because often what I'm looking at is two things that are true. And so instead of letting one whop the other or topple it, let's put them both out there. So there are some things that I think you can do in your space. And I think the reality that you do have a head pastor might generate some conversations and some sharing of what you're exploring and finding and wondering how it could affect the rest of the church and the pastor. Only you will know how well that conversation would go. But I hope that's helpful, at least to knowing that you can make some, the deal is, as you know, with systems theory, it takes one person to make a change in a system. The system may not like the change. It may shove back hard on the change, but one person can make a change.
There's a, I'd argue in many ways, like in our Presbyterian system, like even those people we say are in charge aren't, because of how the decision making works. It's a really interesting dynamic of like, the pastor is the moderator of session, but like is one vote out of 7 or 9, maybe, like, and so even the people that are like in charge, like that's complicated. But Jen, I'll put the title of the book in the chat here for you. When I was on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce in a town where my last pastorate was, we spent some time reading Clay Scroggins' How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And just thinking about like, even when we're in a system where we're not the assigned leader, we've got the ability to affect it.
That's great. Thank you, Barry. Okay. Anyone else? What would it take in a church to change the culture to be a little more emotionally healthy?
Well, one of the things that comes out of the situation with the PCUSA today is that so much is being thrust upon a church. And for example, Matthew 25 is a classic. It's we heard the executive in charge of that and said that she was proud that 50% of the presbyteries had bought into Matthew 25. 50%. That's 1 out of 2. Unfortunately, only 11% of the churches did. That's 1 out of 10, which tells me that there's something else that the churches want that we're missing. And unfortunately, where I'm at, I'm dealing with the part, I'm hearing about the part that we're missing. And the other thing that happens is presbyteries have their own dynamics, and sometimes individuals can get together through a presbytery and get things done they couldn't get done in their original churches. So if you have both those dynamics working at the same time. So the emotional reality is that sometimes the church I serve feels that the presbytery is completely out of touch with where they are and is not willing to listen to where they are.
Mm,
We are a Matthew 25 presbytery, and that's it. We're not interested in church development, redevelopment necessarily, or evangelism, or all those other things.
mhm.
And that's what the churches want. They want
Yeah.
guidance on those kinds of things. So Barry said, you're a member of presbytery, but you're a leader of something else.
Mhm.
So it also should be a pipeline from the bottom up, knowing that what your people want, and you should use your voice in presbytery to say so. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in the malaise where the congregation is saying, well, whatever the presbytery wants, they can have.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
and the resources they're putting out there for Matthew 25 training, everything else doesn't help a congregation that needs to learn how to attract 25 to 40-year-olds, as most of our congregations do. And so you have to deal with that, and you have to deal with that emotional reality. But you also
Yeah, and
have to take the opportunity to say, here is the emotional reality body above, and you have to take it into account as well.
yeah, our congregations really are worried about surviving and doing okay in in a divided time, in a time when young people are moving in other directions. And one of the questions I ask every congregation is, why do we need young families to survive? Do we really need young families to survive? So we've got to break down some ideas. And congregational vitality is part of Matthew 25, but I see your point, Wayne, that we're not doing a good job denominationally of really providing the support to what does congregational vitality look like and how can we get there. Not every presbytery is doing a good job of that. Some are, but we may not be in those. So depending. Yeah. Okay. So there's a role for us as leaders in listening to our congregations and taking that back to the presbytery, also listening to presbytery and talking to our congregations, and in surfacing the very real concerns that are there and the fears so that we can address them. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just say that one of my hopes and dreams for my career is that before I retire, I get to see a time when we actually put value in teaching our leaders, not just our pastors and our CREs, but our elders and perhaps our deacons, skills of emotional intelligence and how to handle group dynamics, how to handle conflict. Because I firmly believe that not only can we not depend on our pastors to do this alone, because they often get targeted, but I believe that this is something that churches need to learn how to do well together. And these are skills that we are not teaching. These are skills that would transform the ability of each of you as CREs to be able to go into a church and work with it. They are skills that would transform the ability of elders to stand up and take responsibility for their church's patterns and work together. So that's my dream and my hope, is that one day we will actually all be able to do this more and understand how big of a role it plays. My church did have a minor conflict recently, and my folks who were in charge of it did not panic. And they went back to, okay, we've had some lessons to learn, and so I'm going to reach out for help. And they called the presbytery. The presbytery said, you've been in these patterns before, which was the right thing to say. And yet my folks were like, yes. And that's why we're calling, because we don't want to go there again. So they've had some training, and it's made a difference in how they've handled things, which has been great. So I really believe that's part of it as well, is that we all see the need and that we help our folks see that too, and we pass things along. All right. Any other comments right now?
I think on what you just said, I really believe and see the value in that. Because what I'm seeing in our organization is it's so much easier for people to just walk away because of the conflict. than
Yes.
to work through it or whatever. And then, so these people are missing and you never really quite know why, and it's never really talked about, and we just keep going. So,
Yes.
to me, that's super scary, as a leader when you feel like it could be different. And I'm not sure how to get that buy-in for, yes, I'm taking on this leadership role in my church, and what can I do to be a better leader for my church? It,
And yeah, part of what you're highlighting is preparation, right? We have to prepare for what we know is going to happen. I tell my congregations all the time, conflict is real. And conflict is something you actually do want to happen every now and again, because it means that people care. If they don't care, they're not going to get involved in a conflict. So we want them to care enough, and we want to be prepared for that. So my congregation is going to be writing and approving a behavioral covenant, because what I've learned is that people tend to be quiet if they don't have good solid ground to stand on. So if they know that something is the rule, some of them will stand up and say, hey, this is the rule. Don't we all need to get good with this, get on the right side of it? So if we have a behavioral covenant, then I'm able to train my folks in how to recognize when people are not lined up with the behavioral covenant and how to gently invite them to comply with it. And then if that doesn't happen, then we move to the next intervention step, right? We've got some of that, but we don't have the behavioral covenant that allows people to say, hey, I know you mean well, but I think there's a way we can rephrase that. Or I think that's probably a little farther than you want to go, according to who we've agreed to be together. So yes, all of that. I think the preparation, the training, it all helps. And it's work that I think we can easily do. We've got to find the money and the buy-in to get it done. Yeah. And I'm happy to help any of you if you have specific questions. All right, let me share my last quick slide, just a wrap up here. So takeaways today, a summary of what I hope we've talked about. Emotional intelligence skills are the biggest differentiator between average leaders and outstanding leaders. It's stuff that we have seen come out in research and data and is definitely supported. Self-awareness is what allows us to manage our emotions and what's going on for us. And then self-management allows us to hold that and be able to, instead of reacting to something off the cuff, think reflectively and respond with an appropriate leadership style, with appropriate actions and implementation of what we're trying to achieve. Leadership styles are not one size fits all. And I hope you each are able to positively celebrate and recognize in yourselves the leadership styles you do have, and to know how valuable those are for your ministry settings. They are so important, and thank you for being who you are. You are all doing great work around taking into account the context you're facing and what leadership style is important for your context right now. Please remember, changing the culture of an organization does not happen overnight. It is not about simple changes. It takes intentional planning and work in stages, and it takes a while. And you need support around you for that. And so part of what I'm hoping the Synod can consider, and no, Barry, I'm not trying to influence or manipulate or send the CRE track anywhere in particular, but part of what I'm hoping that the Synod could think about is how we create cohort groups that go through some of these things together, training together, support each other longer term, with some intentional work together. Because when you do this, you need a group of people to bounce things off of and say, am I way off base here? Or am I doing something that's really good and yet I can't see the results yet and I just need to stick with it? And then lastly, I think it's pretty clear that an emotionally healthy organization needs more than one person trained and needs a coordinated effort by leadership to work together to make all of these things become part of the culture. in our organizations. It is possible. We can transform, but we need that intentional time and space, and considering how we do our leadership and making sure that we understand some principles of emotional intelligence that will really help us get there. So, this is my contact information. Oh, I forgot to put my email on there. I'll put my email in the chat so that if any of you would like to get a hold of me, you can. Actually, I think I'm going to put my personal email because that'll be a little bit easier for you and me to keep up with. All right. So you'll be able to contact me if you wish. I'm happy to do it. And the Interim Ministry Network is where I'm doing some other leading right now. They do have some training that is good on all aspects of, they're still called Interim Ministry Network, but they're really working on transitional ministry, which I think is a great aspect for our time today and where we are in the world. All right. Other questions, comments, anything as we wrap up?
I'm going to follow up with you on some of that I already learned on emotional intelligence. And quite frankly, you have taken it in a direction that is actually useful, which I appreciate. Also, you made a comment earlier about technical expertise doesn't make a good leader. Well,
Doesn't change the average to outstanding. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. One of the issues I have is I'm the only CRE in this presbytery and have been for some time. Now, the other presbyteries in our synod, some of them have as many CREs almost as they do regular pastors, if you will. But I'm the only one. And what I also have to deal with in my leadership style is people who tell me to my face that I am A, devaluing the profession, which is an interesting point, and B, how could you possibly be a pastor? You can't speak and read Greek. You can't explain what tulip is, and so on and so forth. Well, my answer to that is congregations don't care about that stuff. And I'm glad finally the PCUSA has put together a, what do you want to call it, a working group? And I guess one of our CREs is on it to try and define what pastoral leadership in 2025 really is. Because we're still stuck in the past, about, we need to know all these theological things and go all the way back to Reformed theology and everything else. Churches that are thriving don't do that. You know how hard it is for me to walk out my front door and see a church right next door with a bunch, so many people in it, they have to have parking lot attendants to park. So I met with the assistant pastor. I said, there's obviously he says, well, we're only in the business of saving souls. We're not in the business of showing people how smart we are. Okay. And so I'm glad the PCUSA, and if they're serious, I hope they really come through with that, because I am facing that all the time when I try to make a point. Well, you're not really a pastor. You don't understand. We went to seminary. We know all about this stuff. And it's a real issue. So
I'm sorry for the discrimination, Wayne. I mean, there are, as a seminary trained professional, I do see some value in what we've done and had to learn. And I am so thankful that there are folks like you who are ready to learn and to grow and to get into churches and help them, because there aren't enough of us to go around, and we need you.
Mm-hmm.
We need you.
Well,
and we need to be a team, so that if you get a point where you need to know about tulip or about Reformation stuff or whatever it might be, you have someone you feel confident asking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I asked my mentor about that. I said, I can't speak Greek. And she said, I can't either. But she said, something, there's these things called commentaries. where some of the best experts that ever lived have gone through all that Greek and translated it in a way that you can understand it. So why do we have to do it twice? And that's the way she viewed things. And she went to McCormick
Jen,
Seminary.
thank you. I was seeing her note, Wayne. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you to Jen. I appreciate it all. And I know Tim will be in touch. Yeah. Yeah. And you too,
So
good
anyway,
to go, Barry? Yep.
Yeah, I've got my next meeting. Good to meet everybody. Thank you
Right.
so much,
Okay.
Kimberly.
Thank
well,
you.
thank
I
you very
appreciate
much
your
for
time.
everything. That it was a very, very important use of my time, and I will take this information and go with it.
Good. Good. Okay. I'm glad, Wayne. Thank you. Tabitha, anything I can do for you long term, or are you okay for right now?
I think I'm all right. Learned a lot of useful information that hopefully can benefit us.
Okay.
It's just time to have some real tough conversations. So
It is. And as I say, I'm hoping your COM offers support, that whoever your liaison is will be there for you. And if that's not the case, go knocking at doors. Okay. Whether it's your Presbytery leadership, you've got Barry and Tim both. Our Synod exec is helpful. So, get the support that you need, because those are hard conversations to have with two small churches. And I feel for you. I really do. And thank you for having the courage.
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Wayne, anything else I can do for you, or are you good?
I'm good for right now. Like I say, I'll be following up with you. And like I say, I've had to study this very, very hard over the past couple of years, because as I said, this is my third church, the other two closed. And I'm almost afraid 3 strikes and you're out.
No, please know that's not about you. Okay. I'm in my 7th church, 5th as solo pastor. Okay. One of those 5 was an interim. My churches haven't grown. Okay. So this is not about pastoral leadership ability. This is about very huge cultural changes and shifts. It is about our reluctance to respond, which I'll have identified very well today. And it is about having, the part of it that is skills-based is that the more we understand some of these underlying skills, the more we can push people to really get them out of their comfort zones and have to deal with what's in front of them. When we do that, that's when we have a shot. Until we do that, it's very hard to have a shot. So this is not about the quality of your leadership. This is about a whole lot of things that are coming to head at once. So please don't let that get you down. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Grace and peace be with you both. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.